6 years old. That's how old she was when she walked straight into the office of the most feared rich man in the city, and asked him for help. 3 months earlier, she had been a quiet little girl who loved drawing butterflies and singing in the kitchen with her mother. But now, she was waking up every night crying. Every morning, the 8 blocks to school felt like walking through a battlefield. The school knew. The teachers knew. The principal knew. But the family of the child who was hurting her was wealthy, powerful, and well-connected. So the poor little girl learned a hard lesson most adults never recover from. In this world, money protects some children and leaves others alone. What happened next would bring a powerful man to his knees and change 3 lives forever. If stories about courage, family, and second chances touch your heart, take a moment to subscribe. It helps this channel keep sharing stories that matter. The girl's name was Willa. She lived with her mother, Bryn, in a small 3rd-floor apartment above a laundromat on the west side of the city. The walls were thin. The carpet was worn. And the kitchen table had a leg that wobbled unless you folded a piece of cardboard under it. But the apartment was clean, warm, and full of love. Bryn worked 2 jobs. Mornings at a diner. Evenings cleaning offices downtown. She had raised Willa alone since the day she was born. No child support. No family help. No safety net. Just a tired woman and a promise she had made to herself. My daughter will have a better life than I did. For years, she kept that promise. Until 3 months ago. It started small. A rich girl in Willa's class named Peyton didn't like her clothes. Said they were cheap. Said she smelled like thrift stores. Said her backpack looked like something from a donation box. Then Peyton's 2 friends joined in. The whispers started first. Then the laughing. Then the shoving. Always where adults couldn't see. If a teacher turned around, Peyton would smile sweetly and say, "Sorry, it was an accident." If Willa cried, the teacher would sigh and say, "You need to be less sensitive, honey." For 90 days, Willa ate lunch alone at the end of a table. For 90 nights, she cried into her pillow so her mother wouldn't hear. But mothers always hear. Bryn went to the school 5 times. 5. Each time she sat in the principal's office, hands shaking, voice breaking, explaining the bruises, the tears, the fear. And each time she heard the same careful answer. There isn't enough evidence. You know how children exaggerate. Peyton's family is very involved in the school community. The last sentence meant something else. Peyton's father funded the new gym. Peyton's mother chaired the school board events. Peyton's family wrote checks. And checks were louder than a poor mother's voice. The 5th time Bryn left the office, she didn't cry in front of the principal. She waited until she got to the car. Then she put her forehead on the steering wheel and cried so hard she couldn't breathe. That night, Willa pretended to be asleep. But she heard everything. Something changed inside her after that. Children don't always break loudly. Sometimes they break quietly, like a string snapping inside the chest. The next morning, Willa didn't tell her mother she was scared. She didn't ask to stay home. She didn't cry. Instead, she took a piece of paper and a red crayon and wrote 8 uneven words. I want to feel safe going to school. She folded it carefully and put it in her jacket pocket. Then she did something no 6-year-old should ever have to do. She didn't walk toward school. She crossed the street everyone told her to stay away from. At the corner stood a tall glass building where black luxury cars were always parked outside. People walked faster when they passed it. Parents told their kids not to look at it. The building belonged to Cale Mercer, a man who owned half the West Side, a man whose name businessmen spoke carefully, a man the police never bothered unless they had no other choice. A rich man. A dangerous man. 2 security guards in dark suits stood outside the entrance. Willa walked straight up to them. She was so small that the top of her head barely reached their elbows. The taller guard looked down, confused. "Sweetheart, are you lost?" Willa shook her head. Her hands were trembling. Her voice was tiny. "I need to see your boss." The guards exchanged a look. "Why?" Willa swallowed hard. "Because someone is hurting me, and nobody else will help." Inside the building, 23 floors above the street, Cale Mercer was in the middle of a meeting about territory lines and business disputes. His world ran on numbers, pressure, and quiet power. Children did not exist in his world. Until his phone rang. The line his security team used only for emergencies. He answered without looking up. "What is it?" A pause. Then the guard's voice. "Sir, there's a little girl downstairs. Says she needs your help. Says someone's hurting her in your neighborhood." Silence. Then Cale asked one question. "How old?" "Maybe 6. Cale stood up. For a moment, he didn't know why. But something old and buried had just moved inside his chest. "Bring her up," he said. Downstairs, the elevator doors opened. The guard looked at Willa. "You're going to see him now." Willa nodded. But as the elevator doors closed and the floor numbers began to rise, her small hands gripped her backpack tighter. Because suddenly she wasn't just afraid of the girls at school anymore. She was about to meet the most powerful man in the city. And she had no idea that this meeting would change his life even more than hers. In the next part, you'll see what happened when a frightened little girl handed a powerful man a piece of paper and made him remember the child he used to be. Before we continue, I'd love to know something. Have you ever had a moment when one small act of kindness changed your life? Tell me in the comments. The elevator doors opened without a sound. Willa stepped out slowly, her sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. Everything around her looked too clean, too quiet, too expensive. The air even smelled different, like leather and something sharp she couldn't name. At the far end of the room stood a tall man in a dark suit. Cale Mercer. He didn't move at first. He just looked at her. She was smaller than he expected. Thin arms. A backpack that looked too heavy for her shoulders. Hair pulled into two uneven buns, like someone had tried their best but didn't quite have time. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Willa's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. She thought about turning around. About running back to the elevator. About pretending she made a mistake. But then she remembered the tree on the corner. The laughing. The shoving. The way her mother cried in the car. There was nothing to go back to. She took 3 small steps forward. Cale watched the way she walked. Careful. Ready to stop at any second. Like a child entering a place she knew didn't belong to her. He had walked like that once. Years ago. "Come here," he said quietly. His voice wasn't cold. But it wasn't warm either. It was careful, like he didn't quite know how to talk to someone her size. Willa stopped a few feet in front of his desk. Up close, he looked even bigger. His shoulders were wide. His face serious. The kind of face grown-ups lowered their voices around. Her hands were shaking now. Slowly, she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out the folded paper. The edges were soft from being handled too many times. She held it out. Cale looked at the small hand first. Then the paper. Then her face. He took it gently. For a man who made decisions worth millions without blinking, his fingers moved carefully, like the paper might tear. He unfolded it. The crayon letters were uneven. Some darker where the pressure had been too hard. Some faint where the color was wearing down. 8 words. "I want to feel safe going to school." Cale read it once. Then again. The room seemed to tilt for a second. Because 30 years ago, he had written the same thing. Different house. Different life. Pencil instead of crayon. But the same words, the same fear, the same loneliness. He folded the paper slowly and looked at her. "What's your name?" "Willa." His throat tightened a little. He didn't know why. "Who's hurting you, Willa?" Her eyes dropped to the floor. "There's a girl. And her friends. Teachers know." She nodded. "Principal." Another nod. "And they said there's no proof." Her voice got smaller. "Her family is important." Cale leaned back slightly. He understood that language. Important meant rich, protected, untouchable. Willa kept talking, the words coming out slowly, like she was afraid of saying too much. "They wait for me by the tree. Every morning. If I try to walk another way, they follow me." Her fingers twisted together. "They push me when teachers don't see. They laugh when I fall. They tell everyone not to sit with me." She swallowed. "I eat alone." Cale didn't interrupt. "She tells everyone my clothes are cheap. That my mom is poor. That I don't belong at that school." Her voice cracked then. "I try not to cry. Because if I cry, they say I'm weak." She wiped her cheek quickly with the back of her hand. The motion hit him like a punch. Fast, hidden, like crying was something shameful. He had done the same thing when he was 7. The same quick wipe. The same trying to erase the evidence. "I'm sorry," Willa whispered suddenly. "I didn't mean to cry." Cale froze. Sorry for crying. Sorry for hurting. Sorry for needing help. The words settled heavy in his chest. Without thinking, he stood up. Then he did something no one in that building had ever seen him do. He walked around the desk. And slowly, he knelt down. Now they were eye level. Willa blinked, surprised. "You don't have to apologize," he said. His voice was softer now. "Asking for help isn't weakness." She looked at him carefully, like she wasn't sure if she believed that. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. Willa hesitated. Her eyes moved to the paper in his hand, then back to his face. "I don't need you to punish them." The answer surprised him. "I don't want anyone to get in trouble." Her voice trembled. "I just want you to walk me to school." Cale didn't move. "So they see I'm not alone." Her fingers tightened around her backpack straps. "Just one day," she added quickly. "If they see someone important with me, they'll stop." The request was so small. No money. No revenge. No power. Just someone to walk beside her. For a second, Cale couldn't speak. Because that was the one thing no one had ever done for him. When he was a child. When he was scared. When he stood outside school every morning wishing someone would just walk next to him. Behind them, his phone buzzed on the desk. His assistant stepped closer. "Sir, the meeting with Brennan is in 20 minutes. The territory agreement." "Cancel it," Cale said. The assistant froze. "Sir, that meeting decides whether there's peace on the west side." Cale didn't take his eyes off Willa. "I said cancel it." Silence filled the room. The assistant stepped back. Cale looked at Willa. "I'll walk you to school." Her eyes widened. "Really?" He nodded. "Really?" For the first time since she entered the building, her shoulders lifted slightly. Not fully, but enough to see hope trying to breathe again. Cale stood and held out his hand. It was large, rough, a hand people feared. Willa stared at it. Then she placed her small hand inside. Her fingers tightened immediately, like she was holding onto something she was afraid might disappear. As they walked toward the elevator together, Cale didn't notice the way his security team was staring, or the messages already starting to spread through the building. The powerful boss had just cancelled a city deal for a 6-year-old girl. Outside, 3 black cars were already pulling into position. Willa stepped into the middle one, her eyes wide as she looked at the leather seats. Cale sat beside her. The doors closed. The cars began to move. For the first few blocks, neither of them spoke. Then Willa whispered, almost to herself, "They'll be waiting by the tree." Cale looked out the window, and something in his expression changed, because he realized this wasn't just about walking a child to school. Someone had been hurting a little girl in his neighborhood, and now he was going to see exactly who thought they were untouchable. The cars slowed as they turned onto the street that led to Monroe Elementary. Willa's body changed before they even reached the gate. Her shoulders curled inward. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her backpack. Her breathing became shallow, quick, like she was bracing for something she couldn't stop. Cale noticed it immediately. Fear has a posture. He knew it well. "Where?" he asked quietly. Willa didn't point right away. She leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on the sidewalk ahead. "There," she whispered. The cars rolled past the corner. Under the big oak tree stood 3 girls. One of them was taller than the others. Ponytail. Arms crossed. Laughing at something the other 2 had said. Peyton. Even from inside the tinted window, Willa's hands began to shake. "They're always there," she said, her voice barely holding together. "Every morning." The cars stopped at the curb in front of the school. For a moment, Willa didn't move. Her eyes stayed fixed on the girls. Then her breathing sped up. "Can we go back?" she asked suddenly. Cale turned toward her. "I don't want to get out," she whispered, panic rising. "Please, can we go back? I'll just stay home. I won't tell my mom. I'll say I'm sick." Her fingers were gripping the seat now. "I can't do it today. I can't." Cale didn't rush her. He didn't raise his voice. He waited until she looked at him. "Willa." She forced her eyes up. "You walked into my building this morning," he said calmly. "You asked 2 grown men to let you see someone they were afraid of." She blinked. "You rode an elevator 23 floors by yourself." Her breathing slowed just a little. "You stood in front of me and asked for help." He leaned closer, his voice steady. "That takes courage." Willa swallowed. "But I'm still scared," she said. "I know," Cale answered. He opened the car door and stepped out. The other doors opened at the same time. His security team moved into position without a word, spreading out along the sidewalk. Parents standing near the school gate began to stare. 3 black luxury cars. Men in dark suits. Something serious was happening, even if no one understood what yet. Cale walked around the car and opened the door for Willa. He held out his hand. She looked at it, then at the girls under the tree, then back at him. Her hand slid into his. This time, she held on tight. When they stepped onto the sidewalk together, the morning noise began to fade. Conversations slowed. Heads turned. Some of the parents recognized Cale immediately. Others just felt the shift in the air that comes when someone powerful enters a place where power doesn't usually walk. Under the tree, Peyton stopped laughing. Her eyes moved from the cars to the men in suits, and finally to Cale. Then she saw who was holding his hand. Willa. The smile disappeared from her face. Cale didn't look at Peyton right away. He kept his focus forward, walking at a steady pace toward the school gate. Willa's steps were small beside him, but she didn't try to pull back. The closer they got, the quieter the yard became. By the time they reached the gate, dozens of children were watching. Parents whispered to each other. "Who is that? Isn't that Mercer? What's he doing here?" Willa heard the whispers. She felt every pair of eyes. Her grip tightened again. "I can't," she said softly. "Everyone's looking." Cale stopped, right there in front of the gate. Then, without caring who was watching, he knelt down in front of her. The schoolyard went completely silent. Now they were eye level again. "Yes," he said gently. "They're looking." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't want them to look at me." Cale shook his head slightly. "They're not looking at you because you're weak." She stared at him. "They're looking because you were brave enough to ask for help when nobody else would." Her lips trembled. "You walked through fear to get here today," he continued. "Most people never do that. Not kids. Not adults." A tear slid down her cheek. "I'm still scared," she whispered again. "I know," he said. "So here's what we're going to do." He leaned closer. "You go inside. Go to class. Do your day." Her eyes widened. "And I'll stay right here." She blinked. "All day. All day. You won't leave. Not until school ends." For a moment, she just stared at him. Then she nodded. Slowly, Cale stood and took her hand again. Together, they walked through the gate. As they passed the tree, Peyton stepped forward slightly, her mouth opening. "Willa, you—" Cale turned his head. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't step closer. He simply looked at her. That was enough. Peyton stopped mid-sentence. Her friends moved behind her. One of them grabbed her sleeve and pulled her back. For the first time, the three girls who had ruled the sidewalk for months looked exactly what they were. Children. Willa saw it too. Her chin lifted just a little. They walked into the building together. Inside, teachers stood frozen in their doorways. The principal appeared at the end of the hall, his face pale. "Mr. Mercer," he said quickly, forcing a smile. "You didn't need to come personally. We can handle any concerns." Cale didn't stop walking. "I'm walking Willa to her classroom." The principal stepped aside without another word. When they reached the classroom door, Willa hesitated. She looked up at him. "You'll be here?" she asked. Cale nodded toward the window at the end of the hall. "I'll sit right there." She took a deep breath. Then she did something he wasn't expecting. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. It wasn't a quick hug. It was tight, clinging, like she was holding onto safety itself. "Thank you," she whispered into his jacket. For a moment, Cale stood completely still. No one hugged him. Not like this. Then slowly, carefully, he placed his hand on her back. "Go to class," he said. She let go and walked inside. From the hallway window, Cale watched her take her seat. She glanced outside once. He nodded. She turned back to her desk. And for the first time in 3 months, she picked up her pencil without looking over her shoulder. Cale sat down on the hard bench outside the classroom. His phone began vibrating almost immediately. Messages, calls, business problems, meetings that couldn't wait. He answered them briefly, efficiently. But every few minutes, his eyes lifted to the window. Inside, Willa worked quietly. At 10:15, she looked up. He was still there. At 11:30, she looked again. Still there. At lunch, she sat alone at the end of a table. No one spoke to her. But no one bothered her either. Because word had spread. And sometimes, presence is louder than any threat. By mid-afternoon, Cale's assistant called again. "Sir, there's a problem." Cale didn't take his eyes off the classroom window. "What kind of problem?" "Brennan knows where you are." Cale's expression didn't change. He's asking why the most powerful man on the West Side is sitting outside an elementary school. A pause. Then the assistant added quietly, "He said everyone has a weakness." Cale looked through the glass. Inside the classroom, Willa was laughing softly at something another girl had said. For the first time that day, she looked like a normal 6-year-old. Cale ended the call. And for the first time in years, the word weakness didn't feel like a threat. It felt like something worth protecting. Across the room, Willa looked up again. And this time, she smiled. That smile stayed with him for the rest of the afternoon. It was small, careful, the kind of smile that doesn't come from happiness yet, but from relief. From a child realizing the danger might actually be over. When the final bell rang, Cale was already standing. Children poured into the hallway, loud and restless, backpacks swinging, voices echoing. The normal chaos of a school day ending. Then Willa appeared in the doorway. She spotted him immediately. Her steps slowed for a second, like she was making sure he was really still there. Then she ran. Not the desperate run from the morning. This one was lighter. She reached him and grabbed his hand, breathing fast but smiling. "You stayed," she said, almost surprised. "I told you I would." She nodded, serious again for a moment, as if promises were something she had learned not to trust easily. They walked outside together. The black cars were still waiting. Parents stopped and stared again. Some whispered. Some pulled their children closer. But this time, Willa's shoulders didn't curl inward. She walked beside him. The tree on the corner was empty. No Peyton. No friends. No laughter. Willa noticed. "They're not there," she said quietly. Cale followed her gaze. "No," he answered. She kept looking at the empty space as they got into the car. "It feels smaller," she added after a moment. "What does?" "The tree." Cale didn't answer right away. Because he understood. Fear makes everything bigger. Safety makes it shrink. The ride back was quiet. Not the tense silence from the morning. This was a softer kind of quiet, the kind that comes when the worst part of the day is already behind you. When they stopped in front of her building, Willa hesitated before getting out. "Will you come tomorrow?" she asked. Cale looked at her. "Yes." She studied his face for a second, like she was trying to measure the truth. Then she nodded and climbed out. The front door opened before she even reached the steps. Bryn rushed out. She had been watching from the window all day. Her eyes were red, like she hadn't slept. Like she had spent every hour wondering if she had made the biggest mistake of her life by letting her daughter walk into a stranger's building that morning. "Mom!" Willa ran to her. "He stayed," she said immediately. "All day. Every time I looked, he was there." Bryn pulled her into a tight hug. Her shoulders shook. Then she looked up at Cale. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was fear in her eyes. But there was something else now, too. Gratitude. "Thank you," she said quietly. Cale nodded once. "I'll bring her tomorrow morning." Bryn hesitated. Then she stepped aside slightly. "Would you like some water?" she asked. It wasn't an invitation. Not really. It was something small. Careful. The way people speak when they don't trust you yet, but they're starting to. Cale followed her inside. The apartment was exactly what he expected. Small. Clean. Everything in its place because there wasn't room for anything extra. A table pushed against the wall. Crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator. A couch that had been repaired more than once. The air smelled like laundry soap and something baking. It didn't look like much, but it felt like a home. He stood there awkwardly for a moment, suddenly more out of place than he ever felt in a boardroom full of executives. Bryn handed him a glass of water. She didn't sit. She stood across from him, her arms folded loosely, her body angled slightly toward the door, ready to move if she needed to. "I know who you are," she said. Cale didn't react. "I've lived in this neighborhood a long time," she continued. "People talk." A pause. "I should be grateful," she said honestly. "My daughter hasn't looked this calm in months." She glanced toward Willa, who was already at the table, opening her backpack without being asked. Then Bryn looked back at him. "But I'm also afraid." The words weren't angry. They were tired. "Every man who's ever had more power than me has hurt me," she said quietly. "My father left. The man I was with didn't leave, but maybe he should have. The school had power. They ignored us." Her voice stayed steady, but her fingers tightened slightly around her sleeve. "And you," she finished. "You have more power than all of them." Cale listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend himself. "I don't understand why you helped her," Bryn said. "And when I don't understand something, I get nervous." Silence settled between them. Finally, Cale spoke. "You're right to be afraid." That wasn't the answer she expected. "My hands aren't clean," he continued. "I'm not a good man." Bryn's eyes flickered. Most powerful men denied things, explained things, justified things. They didn't admit them. "I don't know how to explain why I helped her," he said honestly. "But today was the first day in a long time I did something I didn't hate myself for." Bryn studied him. Then she looked toward Willa again. The girl was humming softly while she worked. No tension in her shoulders. No fear in the way she kept glancing at the door. Just a child doing homework. Bryn swallowed. "She slept last night," she said quietly. "First full night in 3 months." Her voice broke slightly. "I laid there at 2 in the morning just listening to her breathe." She wiped her eyes quickly, the same fast motion Willa used. Then she took a steady breath. "I don't trust you," she said honestly. Cale nodded. "But," she hesitated, "don't disappear." "Not yet." The words were small. Not trust. Not forgiveness. Just time. Cale finished his water and stood. "I'll be here tomorrow," he said. When he stepped outside, the evening air felt colder. Inside the car, his phone was already buzzing. Messages. Missed calls. Problems stacking up from the day he had spent sitting outside a classroom instead of running his business. His driver glanced at him in the mirror. "Sir, Brennan's people have been asking questions." Cale leaned back in the seat. "What kind of questions?" "They want to know why you canceled the meeting. Why you spent the day at a school." A pause. Then the driver added quietly, "They're saying you've gone soft." Cale looked out the window. Up at the third-floor apartment. Through the curtain, he could see Willa sitting at the table, her head bent over her homework. For the first time in years, the word soft didn't sound like an insult. It sounded like something he had forgotten how to be. His phone buzzed again. This time, the message was just one line. "We all have weaknesses. Now we know yours." Cale stared at the screen. Then he looked back up at the window. And for the first time since this began, he realized helping one little girl might have just started something much bigger than bullying. Something that could put her directly in the middle of his world. Cale didn't answer the message. He didn't need to. He already understood what it meant. In his world, nothing stayed quiet for long. A powerful man changes his routine, cancels meetings, spends a full day outside an elementary school. People notice. And when powerful people notice something unusual, they don't ask out of curiosity. They ask to measure risk. The car pulled away from the building. but Cale kept his eyes on the third-floor window until it disappeared behind the corner. Inside, Willa was safe. For now. The next morning, the cars arrived at exactly 7:30. The third-floor door opened almost immediately. Willa came running down the stairs, backpack bouncing behind her. But this time she didn't run like she was escaping something. She ran like she was meeting someone she trusted. "You came," she said, even though the cars had been there yesterday and the day before. "I told you I would," Cale answered. She nodded, satisfied, and climbed into the car without hesitation. Up above, Bryn stood at the railing, watching. Their eyes met for a brief moment. She didn't smile. But she didn't look afraid anymore either. At school, the change was already visible. No one waited under the tree. No one stood in the hallway watching her. Peyton stayed on the other side of the classroom. No whispers. No pushing. No laughter. Fear had changed direction. But Cale noticed something else. During lunch, Willa still sat alone. No one bullied her. But no one sat with her either. Silence can be another kind of loneliness. That afternoon, while Cale sat on the bench outside the classroom, the teacher approached him. She looked nervous, the way people always did when they spoke to him. "Mr. Mercer," she said carefully, "I wanted you to know. Willa's doing better today." He nodded. The teacher hesitated. Then she added quietly, "I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner." Cale looked at her. There was guilt in her eyes. The kind adults carry when they realize their comfort mattered more than a child's pain. "She doesn't need apologies," Cale said. "She needs adults who don't look away." The teacher lowered her eyes. "I understand." When the final bell rang, Willa walked out instead of running. She looked different. Not confident yet, but steadier. Like the ground under her feet wasn't shaking anymore. "Peyton didn't talk to me," she reported as they walked outside. "That's good." "She didn't look at me either." Willa thought about that for a moment. "Is that good too?" Cale opened the car door for her. "For now," he said. That evening, Bryn was waiting at the door again. But this time, she stepped outside before Willa reached the stairs. "I went to the school today," she said to Cale. He waited. "I asked for a meeting with the principal." Again. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharper than before. "What did he say?" Cale asked. "He said they're reviewing the situation." A small pause. "He also said the Langford family called this morning." Cale didn't react outwardly, but he understood. The Langfords were Peyton's family. Money talks. Connections talk louder. "They're worried," Bryn continued, "about attention, about reputation." Willa had already gone inside. Bryn lowered her voice. "I don't want this to become a fight between powerful families and powerful men," she said. "I just want my daughter to be safe without someone having to stand guard over her." Cale looked at her. "That's the goal," he said. She studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "I believe you," she said quietly. It was the first time she had said anything close to trust. But that night, back in the penthouse, Cale received another message. A photo. Taken from across the street. The yellow building. Third floor. The window with the thin curtain. A second message followed. "If you keep bringing your world into theirs, it won't end well." Cale stared at the image for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and called his security chief. "From tomorrow," he said, "there's coverage on that building. Quiet. No uniforms. No attention. Understood. And if anyone unfamiliar sits across that street longer than 5 minutes." A pause. They leave. The next few days passed without incident. At school, something small began to change. On Thursday, a girl from Willa's class sat beside her at lunch. She didn't say much. Just opened her lunchbox and ate. Willa didn't speak either. But she didn't move away. The next day, the same girl sat there again. When Willa told Cale that afternoon, she tried to sound casual. "Her name is Zoe," she said. "That's good," he answered. She didn't talk much. "That's okay." Willa looked out the window. "I think she was scared of Peyton before." Cale nodded. "Fear spreads. But courage does too." That evening, when they reached the apartment, Willa hesitated before getting out of the car. "Will you come tomorrow?" she asked again. "Yes." She studied him carefully. "You always say that." "And I always come." She nodded, then ran upstairs. From the balcony, Bryn watched again. This time, when Cale looked up, she gave a small nod. Not gratitude. Not caution. Something quieter. Recognition. But later that night, the calm broke. Cale's phone rang after midnight. Not a message this time. A call. His security chief spoke without greeting. "We picked someone up outside the building." Cale sat up. "Who?" "Camera. Long lens. He'd been there 2 nights. Silence. Working for Brennan." Cale stood slowly. "Did he get anything?" Another pause. "Yes." The security chief hesitated. "He has photos of the girl. And her mother." Cale closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, there was no softness left. Only calculation. "Bring him in," Cale said. "And double the coverage." "Yes, sir." After the call ended, Cale walked to the window. The city was quiet. Lights glowing in hundreds of buildings. Somewhere out there, men were already talking. Already planning. Because in his world, once someone knew your weakness, they didn't forget it. Across town, on the 3rd floor of a small yellow building, Willa slept peacefully for the 4th night in a row. And for the first time since this began, the danger around her wasn't coming from school anymore. The next morning, the cars arrived earlier than usual. 7:15. The street was still quiet. Most of the neighborhood lights were just beginning to turn off as people left for work. Cale stepped out before the driver could open the door. He looked up at the 3rd floor window. The curtain moved. Bryn was already awake. A few seconds later, the apartment door opened and Willa appeared at the top of the stairs. She didn't run this time. She walked carefully, holding the railing with one hand, like she had something important on her mind. When she reached the bottom, she stopped in front of him. "You came early," she said. "I had some things to do today." She nodded, serious. Then she leaned closer. "Are we in trouble?" she asked quietly. The question caught him off guard. "Why would you think that?" She shifted her backpack. "Mom checked the locks 3 times last night. And she looked out the window a lot. Children notice everything." Cale crouched down so they were eye level. "No," he said calmly. "You're not in trouble." She studied his face, searching for anything that didn't sound true. Then she nodded. "Okay." She climbed into the car. Up above, Bryn stood at the balcony. But this morning, she didn't just watch. She came down. By the time Cale closed the car door, she was already on the sidewalk. Her face was pale, like she hadn't slept. "Something happened," she said without greeting. Cale didn't pretend otherwise. "Yes." She held his eyes. "Is it because of you?" The question wasn't accusing. It was a mother's question. "Is my child in danger because you walked into our lives?" Cale answered honestly. "Yes." Bryn closed her eyes for a second. Not surprised. Just confirming what she had already feared. "What kind of danger?" she asked. Someone was watching the building. Her breath caught slightly. For how long? 2 nights. She looked up toward the third-floor window. Did they take pictures? Yes. Silence stretched between them. Not panic. Not fear. Just the quiet weight of reality settling in. Finally, Bryn spoke. I knew this was temporary. Cale didn't interrupt. I knew someone like you couldn't walk into our lives without something following you. She wrapped her arms around herself, thinking. But I also know something else, she added. What? My daughter slept through the night for the first time in 3 months because of you. Her eyes met his again. So we're not running. Cale watched her carefully. You're sure? I've been running my whole life, she said quietly. From men. From problems. From places that didn't want us. Her voice steadied. I'm tired of running. The words hung between them. A poor woman in a worn coat, standing on a cracked sidewalk, telling one of the most powerful men in the city that she wasn't afraid to stay. That kind of courage didn't come from strength. It came from having nothing left to lose. I'll make sure no one gets close to this building, Cale said. Bryn shook her head slightly. I don't want guards everywhere. I don't want men standing around making us look like targets. They'll be discreet. She hesitated, then nodded once. Okay. She turned to go back inside, then stopped. One more thing. Cale waited. If this gets worse, if your world comes too close to her. Her voice didn't shake. I will take her and disappear. He nodded. I understand. She studied him for a moment. Then she went back upstairs. The ride to school was quieter than usual. Willa looked out the window most of the way. When they arrived, the routine was the same. No one under the tree. No one waiting. But something else had changed. There were 2 unfamiliar men across the street from the school. Not in suits. Not obvious. But they were watching. Cale noticed immediately. Willa didn't. He walked her inside. When they reached the classroom door, she hesitated again. Will you still be outside? She asked. Yes. She nodded. Then, before going in, she did something new. She squeezed his hand. Not tight. Not desperate. Just a quick squeeze. Then she went inside. Cale took his place on the bench. But this time, he wasn't just watching the classroom window. He was watching everything. Across the street. Down the hall. Every face that didn't belong. At lunch, something small happened. Zoe sat with Willa again. But this time, another girl joined them. They didn't talk much. But 3 lunchboxes sat together. 3 chairs pulled close. When Willa glanced toward the window and saw Cale, she didn't just smile. She waved. That afternoon, when school ended, she came out laughing about something Zoe had said. For a moment, she looked like any other 6-year-old. Until they stepped outside. The 2 unfamiliar men across the street were gone. In their place was a black sedan. Engine running. Dark windows. Cale stopped walking. Willa looked up. What is it? Nothing, he said calmly. But his hand tightened slightly around hers. The car didn't move. Didn't leave. Just sat there. Watching. The driver stepped out of Cale's car immediately. Sir, he said quietly. That vehicle's been here 20 minutes. Cale nodded. Then he did something that made Willa look up at him. Instead of getting into his own car right away, he walked toward the black sedan. Slow. Come. Direct. The door of the sedan opened before he reached it. A man stepped out. Expensive suit. Confident posture. The kind of confidence money builds. "Mr. Mercer," the man said with a polite smile, "we should talk." Willa watched from the sidewalk. She didn't understand who the man was, but she could feel something had changed, because for the first time since this began, Cale didn't look calm. He looked dangerous, and the man standing in front of him wasn't afraid at all, because he wasn't there about territory, or business, or money. He was there about the girl. Cale stopped a few feet from the man. The morning air felt heavier, like the entire street was holding its breath. Up close, the man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm Daniel Langford," he said calmly. "Peyton's father." Cale didn't offer his hand. "I assumed," he replied. Langford glanced toward the school entrance, where children were still walking inside. His gaze moved briefly to Willa, who stood near Cale's car, watching. Then he looked back. "My daughter came home crying yesterday," Langford said. "She told me a very powerful man stared at her in a schoolyard like she was a criminal." Cale's voice stayed quiet. "Your daughter has been hurting a child for months." Langford nodded once, as if acknowledging a minor inconvenience. "Children argue. They fight. They grow out of it." "She didn't grow out of it," Cale said. "She learned she could get away with it." For a moment, the polite mask slipped from Langford's face. "You've made your point," he said. "The school is handling the situation. But your presence here, your cars, your men watching the building." His voice hardened. "You're turning a schoolyard issue into something much bigger." Cale stepped closer. It became bigger the day adults decided a rich family mattered more than a child's safety. Langford held his gaze. "You think you're protecting that girl," he said quietly. "But what you're really doing is putting a spotlight on her. People talk, Mr. Mercer. People notice who you care about." A pause. "And in your world, attention can be dangerous." Cale didn't answer, because the man wasn't wrong. Langford adjusted his cuffs. "My daughter will stay away from her. The school will make sure of it. The situation is over." He leaned in slightly. "So now you need to decide something. Are you helping that little girl, or are you dragging her into your world just to prove a point?" The words hung in the air. Langford got back into his car. The sedan pulled away without another word. Cale stood there for a long moment. Then he turned back. Willa was still waiting beside his car, her small face serious. "Is everything okay?" she asked. He knelt in front of her. "Yes." She searched his expression. "You look mad." "I'm not mad," he said quietly. "What are you?" He thought about the question. "Careful." She nodded, as if that made sense. That afternoon, Cale didn't stay outside the classroom. Instead, he called Bryn. "Can you meet me at the school after dismissal?" he asked. Her voice tightened immediately. "Is something wrong?" "No. But we need to talk." When the final bell rang, Bryn was already standing near the gate. Willa ran to her first. "Mom, Zoe said we might sit together tomorrow too." Bryn smiled and hugged her. Then she looked at Cale. He waited until Willa moved a few steps ahead, talking about something from class. "I'm pulling back," he said. Bryn blinked. "What do you mean?" "No more cars at the school. No sitting outside the window." Her expression shifted between relief and worry. "Why?" "Because Langford was right about one thing," Cale said. "The more visible I am, the more attention she gets. And attention in my world isn't protection." Bryn looked toward Willa. "So she's on her own again?" "No," Cale said gently. "She's not." He lowered his voice. "I've already spoken to the school board." Quietly. "And the district office." There's an official investigation now. Policies are being enforced. Teachers are being watched. Bryn stared at him. You did that without showing up? Yes. A long silence followed. Then Bryn said softly, You're letting her stand on her own. She's stronger than she thinks, Cale replied. That night, the cars didn't come. The next morning, Willa stood on the sidewalk with her backpack. No black sedan. No security. Just the quiet street. She looked up at her mother. Is he coming? Bryn knelt beside her. He's still here, she said. Just not the way you see. Willa thought about that. Then Zoe appeared at the corner. And another girl walked up beside her. 3 small figures. Waiting. Willa took a breath. Then she started walking toward them. She didn't look back. From a car parked half a block away, Cale watched through the windshield. No guards. No attention. Just distance. He saw the 3 girls join together. He saw them turn the corner toward school. And for the first time, Willa didn't need someone powerful beside her. She had something better. She had confidence. Days turned into weeks. The investigation at the school resulted in changes. New supervision. Clear policies. Consequences that applied to every family, no matter how much money they donated. Peyton apologized. Not perfectly. Not warmly. But she kept her distance. Willa's world slowly grew wider. More kids sat with her. More laughter came home with her. More nights were quiet and peaceful. One Friday evening, Cale came to the apartment for dinner. No cars waiting outside. No tension in the room. Just a small table, 3 plates, and the smell of pasta. After dinner, Willa brought out a drawing. It showed 3 stick figures. 1 small, 1 medium, 1 tall, all holding hands. Who's that? Cale asked. That's me, she said, pointing. That's Mom. Then she tapped the tall figure. And that's you. He looked at the drawing for a long moment. You know, she said, you didn't really walk me to school. Cale raised an eyebrow. No. She shook her head. You walked me back to myself. The room went quiet. Bryn wiped her eyes quickly. And Cale, a man who had built his life on power and control, felt something inside him finally settle. Because for the first time, he understood something simple. Sometimes the strongest thing a powerful person can do is step back and let someone else stand. Weeks later, Willa walked to school every morning with her friends. No fear. No looking over her shoulder. Just 3 girls talking about homework and recess and what they wanted to be when they grew up. And Cale still watched sometimes. From a distance. Not as a protector. Not as a shield. Just as someone who had learned a truth he'd never understood before. The day a 6-year-old asked him to walk her to school, she didn't change her life. She changed his. Because money can build power. Influence can command respect. But love, kindness, and showing up when someone is alone, those are the only things that really make a person strong. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe so we can keep sharing stories that remind us what truly matters. And before you go, tell me in the comments, which region are you watching from?